Okay, so we'll start right now. Can you hear me, Sandra? Can you hear me, Karim, and other presenters? Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Great.
You're loud and clear.
So welcome everyone. I'm Martin Yolanda from Positive Blockchain Community. Good morning or good evening to all of you from Berlin. We are really happy and excited to be hosting this second part of our webinars that Positive Blockchain Script and Impact Hub Berlin are having on the impact of blockchain projects in the context of COVID-19 crisis. Yesterday, we started with 3 projects on digital currencies, with Hive Online, with Grassroots Economic, and Tello. And we had really great discussion focused on community development. And today we are joined by 3 other fascinating projects from representing wide spectrum of economies. We have Sandra Wentege-Hart from Oxfam joining us from Vanuatu in the Pacific.
Hi, everyone.
We have Karim Shabrak from CoinSense, a project in Tunisia, but Karim is joining us from Germany, right, Karim?
Yes. Hello, everybody.
And we have Markus Ewald from Digi Project. It's a German project distributing digital euro voucher, joining us also from Germany. Hi, Markus. So we'll have a few minutes of introduction that I will deliver, and we'll follow with the panel discussion with our speakers, who will also introduce their projects, and then we'll follow with the Q&A. So feel free to, as we talk, as the presenters deliver their presentations, feel free to post the questions in the Q&A. And for those of you who don't know Positive Blockchain, we are an open source database and media platform in a community exploring the potential impact of blockchain in the social and environmental scene. So feel free to visit positiveblockchain.io, and if you have any questions, then also feel free to ask. So this webinar, as I said, our theme is digital currencies, and whether this is a solution for this new reality. The question that we had in mind was what we can learn from the development and humanitarian aid sector for this new reality, as this economic crisis of unprecedented scale unfolds. And just wanted to quickly say what was the conclusion from yesterday's session, that the key to more sustainable financial markets is a distributed economy, local, people, and means driven. As Will Rudick from Grassroots Economics said, for economies to prosper, there needs to be public infrastructure, and monetary one is the most crucial. Well, currently it's really designed for extraction, and that needs to change. So the topic of community currencies, part of the family of digital currencies, has gained importance in the current context. And with the lockdowns in place in most of the world and the global trade plummeting, the consumers, we really turn to the local economies. We support local shops, producers, cafes, and restaurants. Right? Some of us heard from restaurants to to stop using the intermediary delivery, and who are really having high commissions, with this money ending up in foreign company pockets. We are really turning our lenses into local local production, local economies, and crucially, we are producing and consuming what we need. And the big problem that we are facing pretty much everywhere is the liquidity crisis and lack of access or lack of a medium of exchange to deploy to those untapped resources, or to put it simply, a lack of cash flow. And here is where we get to community currencies, which is a very old concept, but actually it answers all those things that I just mentioned. So what are community currencies? They allow the locals to generate assets in their local economy by meeting their needs with their underutilized services and local resources like education, childcare, healthcare, or infrastructure. And it further ensures that locally produced wealth benefits the local population rather than outsiders, something that has been very familiar to us in the global economy. And so digital technologies and blockchain offer really unprecedented opportunities in adopting community currencies, cutting down the costs of paper notes and providing data about how money is spent and where it is used, bringing transparency, security, and efficiency. So I would like to pause here and give the floor to our panelists. They will basically elaborate on their projects, which some of them are actually part of the community currencies that are voucher systems like UnBlocked Cash and Digi, and we'll have a deep dive into this topic. So without further ado, I would like to for Sandra to introduce herself briefly and then tell us about UnBlocked Cash project.
Sure. Thanks, Maciej. Hi, everyone. So I'm based in Vanuatu, which is a tiny Pacific island country not too far from Fiji. So it's 6 p.m. here. I think maybe I win on the time zones. Anyways, so the UnBlocked Cash project is a project that I founded and designed in my role with Oxfam, which is a global nonprofit. And my role for Oxfam is the Pacific Cash and Livelihoods Lead. And what that means is that I manage the portfolio of humanitarian cash payment programs to people affected by natural disasters. And Vanuatu, where I'm based, happens to be not just one of the most remote countries in the world, remote to the point where we have no coronavirus cases, thankfully, for now, but also remote to the point where nobody knows this, but Vanuatu is the world's most disaster-prone country. So enter the UnBlocked Cash project. What we were trying to do with the UnBlocked Cash project is basically make the process of delivering cash and vouchers in remote, multi-island, financially limited environments much easier. So it's really not a project about what blockchain technology can do for us. It's more a project that explores what our experience in these sorts of payment programs can lend to the technology and the broader blockchain ecosystem. So the project is designed to really serve people in places that are remote and on the margins, places like Vanuatu, where this solution was born. And we believe that when we're developing these applications and solutions, that community co-development is really the future of this technology and the gateway to mass adoption. Because Oxfam specializes in delivering life-saving humanitarian assistance in the form of payments, we believe in designing with communities and not just for communities. So to give you an idea of the need for aid transparency, last year, over 1.6 billion euros came from the EU alone to the humanitarian sector. And that's a record high. And of course, it's matched by contributions from other major global donors. But with numbers like those, transparency, accountability, and traceability are key, and they are consistently problematic in the humanitarian sector, whether it be for food aid or for humanitarian cash payments. So for everybody who's in this room, I really want to compel people, especially now with COVID-19, to understand the scale of the problem. So epidemics, pandemics like this, and man-made crises in a post-climate change world are only just growing and crossing borders. They don't care about what country you're in. And luckily for organizations like Oxfam, it's our target market. And so that's where we really see a niche in translating these applications. So this project, the UnBlocked Cash project, has two purposes. One is community inclusion, so both financial inclusion and economic inclusion, which is provided by a voucher-based model, as well as donor transparency. It's one of the few examples today where the voices of these communities have actually served to enrich the application and the infrastructure itself. So as the application and the code has been written to the public Ethereum blockchain. So we're continuously iterating based on the complexity of the environments where Oxfam is operating. Our target audience or our target clients are the unbanked, the socially, financially, and economically excluded. We translate the technology to low literacy environments, and we adapt the user interface to local context so that it's easier to use for local people, but also local staff. And so what we've done is try to convert a humanitarian cash delivery model into one that really uses the power of distributed ledger technology and cryptocurrency to deliver payments that are lower in cost, borderless, that go beyond the bricks and mortar financial infrastructure and kind of build a digital last mile that people in need have access to. And honestly, I believe when I started this project that the blockchain for social good community is sometimes too much talk and not enough action, and that actually if we're not engaging the voices of the communities that we're trying to solve problems for, then there's something fundamentally wrong. And so we're trying to address that. So this project went into a phase 1 pilot last year between April and May, where around 1,200 people, 187 families, and 29 vendors transacted over 1,500 times in a week using this cryptocurrency voucher system, despite the majority never having used a payment card or a smartphone before. And by the end of that pilot, you know, we're working in an environment where the financial ecosystem, the financial infrastructure excludes most people. And now these people are choosing to receive this assistance this way in the future, up to 98% of those participants. We've reduced delivery times using the normal financial infrastructure, which took over an hour to reach each family, to just under 6 minutes to both register and distribute aid to people. And with that, because we're using a blockchain platform, we also have instant traceability from the donor to the individual, including who is spending, where they're spending their money, how much money they're spending, and for what across multiple locations concurrently. And that's critical for environments where humanitarian access, whether you're a country like Vanuatu that has 83, or you're working in a country like Sudan, where there's a conflict and you cannot physically access certain areas, building solutions that are able to allow you to remotely deploy and track are also critical. So fast forward to right now, and then I'll wrap up. We were supposed to go into a phase 2 pilot, but COVID-19, as well as Tropical Cyclone Harold, so this is a Category 5 cyclone that affected over 150,000 people in Vanuatu, that's more than half the population, last month. These dual disasters are giving us an opportunity now to scale this platform. So the UnBlocked Cash platform is a collaboration between Sempo, who runs cryptocurrency vouchers on their platform, and the project-based model developed by Oxfam. We're now scaling both of these models in the case of Vanuatu and potentially across the Pacific, starting in Vanuatu to reach around 50,000 people across the entire country who are affected both by COVID-19 and by TC Herald. And we're planning to do that through a multitude of NGOs. So we've got 10 partners on board for now. And what this allows Oxfam to do is to use a single payment system that is traceable and transparent for everybody involved in the ecosystem, including local government and the central bank, which is really critical. And looking forward, as we look to scale this across the Pacific and elsewhere, Oxfam is a global confederation. So what this means is that we have global offices and presence in over 80 countries with teams that stand to deliver and can again contribute the knowledge that is contextual, that will allow us to further adapt this application to the environments that they work in and ultimately make it more robust. The second country that's just come online to launch a pilot later this year is Venezuela, where we'll be doing full crypto vouchers with no fiat currency cash out. So I guess I'll start there and let Maciej lead with some questions.
Thank you, Sandra. This was really insightful, and wish Daniel from Caracas, who was actually joining us yesterday for the webinar, can be here with us, but given the time zone differences, it's impossible. But thanks that we are recording it, he can join it later. So thank you, Sandra, and I will now give the floor to Karim Shabrak from CoinSense, who will basically talk about how they are building community and developing community resilience with the CoinSense platform. That's Karim. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So, CoinSense is a project which we started thinking about, I think, 2012, and we started piloting this 2017 and 2019. We went to the field and started with the community building. Our main goal is to boost social innovation and entrepreneurs through community currencies. And one of the biggest problems we face today is social innovators and entrepreneurs' lack of funding, and they have difficult to access resources. So mainly our goal was to support with community currencies all kinds of communities. But at the moment, we are focusing especially on our target group, which are the innovators, to build solutions and enterprises which can scale and which have a positive social impact. And so mainly since innovators lack of funding in the beginning, we need alternative ways to support them. And also what we have in the social innovation ecosystem and social entrepreneurship ecosystem, there's a low visibility, there are limited synergies because there are no common platforms, and the lack of reciprocity in the social impact world, because there are a lot of people who give and are volunteers, but we can also give them also something back. And of course, the microfunding instruments are not suitable for to support small ideas or small projects, because you need another kind of decision making. And with Khawla Al-Behi, who is also for one of the core team members in CoinSense, she's an expert in social innovation and in crowd innovation. We have designed a solution which enables also the crowd to take collective decisions in the funding. And mainly what we use the community currencies first to enable the mobilization of different resources, and also to enable collective decision making within communities. And communities can be local communities, but they can be also distributed communities. When we consider, for example, the diaspora experts with the Tunisian projects, with the different universities, with people working in different big companies who have the expertise, we can build a kind of community which has a common goal. And what we do also with the community currency, we enable the flexible rewarding of contribution. People get the coin, can use it somewhere else to get discounts or to get other resources or services. And we are working also to create a legal framework which makes out of the community currencies also collective assets. Because when people allocate the coins to the projects and the projects create a certain equity value, we are trying to make the currencies which then circulate across the community, they are then backed by the equity which has created through the projects. But of course, here you need, of course, a legal framework which almost is not existent in most of the country yet, or it's too expensive to implement such a legal and financial framework where you can have tokenized assets which are really legally binding. And this is especially our goal, because in Tunisia we have very, very good experts. We have young people who are really willing to create projects which have a positive impact on society, and we want them to start working on their project before being forced to apply for corporate or to leave the country and to work for profit value extraction companies or companies which do not serve the common good. And this is our goal, so we try to be the easier way for them to start. Mainly, we have our project was supported by the UNICEF Innovation Fund, where we got funding in 2019, and we have the tool where user can register, they can create their own challenge, they can submit projects, and they can also put resources and services in the marketplace. And every community can issue its own currencies to start at first experimenting. And we have piloted the solution with different universities in different hackathons, in different communities as well, university and also local community in south of Tunisia, where we find also a lot of interesting use cases which we can address. This is mainly from our side, from the Currencies platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Karim. Thank you for your introduction, and yeah, I look forward to discussing this further. But now we will turn to Marcus Ewald from Project Digi, which is a project that is very, very new. It came out of the hackathon, the German hackathon, We versus Virus, and Marcus is a member of Bundesblock, that's German blockchain association. So he has an interesting background, also from a political side, and that's quite an interesting perspective to add to this discussion. So Marcus, please introduce yourself a bit, and especially the project that you are working on with this Digi.
I mean, everything seems to be green lit here with me, so I don't know.
Yeah, we can hear you now, so maybe you can just continue.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so first off, a shout out to Maike, who is part of the Digi team and also organizing with you guys, as I know. So pretty good. We are most of us in the hackathon are part of the Bundesblock 2. Florian Glatz and me, we founded the Bundesblock in 2017, and we achieved several breakthroughs in legislation recently. When this crisis came, we were discussing also with economists what needed to be done. And one of the things that is pretty clear, that a fantastically huge and complex recession will be looming, because we have a shock on multiple locations simultaneously. The problem with all those stimulus packages is that only a fraction is really effective, and only a part goes there where it needs to go. For example, if you hand out helicopter money, which is one option, a fraction of it, to 40 to 70%, will be saved instead of spent. And of the amount that is spent, maybe half of it is going to online shopping, which is a big winner anyway. So maybe 1/6 of the total amount is only going to the enterprises that need help. This is obviously just guesswork. It could be 1/10 or it could be 1/3. We don't know. We don't know for any of those measures how effective they really are, but we know that they are not 100% by far. Why is that important? Well, this crisis can take a while. This is the first wave. Maybe it's the last one, but maybe it is the first wave of 5 waves or of 10 waves. And if we want to keep this society as it is, we will need government spending to save and keep the society as it is. And every society has a breaking point, a political, a financial, a psychological breaking point, how many waves it can endure to pay and to keep people alive and out of the hospitals. Nigeria, for example, in Nigeria, the number is 0.5. So they managed to have half a lockdown until the people were going too hungry to survive. With the United States and other Western countries, it's maybe 2 or 3 waves until it collapses. Denmark spent 15% of GDP, so it maybe is also 2 or 3 waves until they're spent. So it's pretty important how effective the measures you have are. If they are 3 times as effective, you are able to survive as a society 3 times more waves. And this can be the difference between the next normal being just a slightly different version of yesterday, or the next normal being a slightly dystopic version of yesterday, or the next normal being a completely dystopic clusterfuck because people are dying in the streets. And all societies will have their own path to go to walk. What we were developing were vouchers that the state gives out with properties. The properties being you can only spend it in a specific area in a specific time for a specific purpose. So a local enterprise in our case. We're currently working on making it true. We're working on a test region. The government tells us that if the test is successful, there's a good probability that they will, as part of a solution, take digital vouchers in order to be more effective and efficient in the next waves. It is pretty exciting because obviously this thing, we invented it for this crisis, but once the system is established, everyone could basically create their own payment obligations, as the state does. The state created payment obligations with conditions, and if these conditions are met, he's gonna convert it into euros. The conditions for Digi are you need to spend it in a local enterprise in a specific and given time, and if that promise is fulfilled, you get euros for this voucher. Obviously, if you open it up, this infrastructure, there's a whole new economy waiting for payment obligations created that are viable after specific conditions have been met. So it's pretty exciting to see what is behind all the current and pressing issues, and we're working on those too. So if there are any questions, please feel free. I forgot to turn the slides. Oh yeah, one thing: a vaccine or a cure is something that can take 1 year. It can take 6 years. We don't know, and so it is a big question: how many waves can you survive? That's
Right. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for your presentation, and apologies for interrupting you. I actually, when you were speaking back, I couldn't actually hear anything. So, but I'm glad that it worked finally. So, actually, just let's start with you and Digi. Could you actually tell us about the importance of the direction in which this aid is distributed in this project, that the government is not distributing aid to the businesses, right, who are suffering from cash from liquidity crisis.
So what it's going to be is people will get vouchers for consumption. So you would, for example, get a basket of vouchers, part of it for restaurants, part of it for mobility solutions, part of it for, I don't know. And then you can spend them at enterprises that are local, not enterprises that are, for example, Amazon. Once these enterprises have those vouchers, they can take them and get euros for them with the state. Why is that better than giving it to them directly? Well, if you give it to them directly, you're going to lose economic activity, you're going to lose welfare with the people who get consumption, and you're also going to use taxes for consumption that finance communities. So you lose a lot of actors in the game, and you need to spend money on those actors too if you lose them. So the same is true for helping artists, for example, musicians, maybe theater players. If you have vouchers specifically designed for that reason, they can perform. If you just give them money, they can't. So you need to basically keep the economy alive, and you keep the society alive with those vouchers. The beauty of it is, as a society, we can always decide to just print the money, to just have the central bank issue these obligations with a specific target in mind in order to preserve that part of the society that we want to be preserved. One thing is clear, any lockdown is a huge, huge competitive advantage for everything that is online compared to offline. And while it is true that innovation must happen, and it will happen, and people need to innovate to be more online if possible, it is also true that I want to take a walk through the city and sit down in a cafe, and I want to be surrounded by other people going shopping and spending money in malls or little stores. And if we want to preserve that way of life, of feeling in a city, we need to spend money on offline things in lockdowns.
Yeah, that's a good summary of the situation and the problem that we are facing. So I want to now turn to Sandra and ask ask you really come back to the reason of using blockchain. Why UnBlocked Cash being this digital cash and voucher assistance program? Why do you think blockchain gives this project an advantage? Like, what is the added value here for people? Some of us here in the audience might not really know what blockchain here really adds. So I want to just emphasize what is the added value here.
Yeah, I think the quick answer to that is that when you work with a technology that is rapidly emerging and changing, it gives you flexibility. The reality is that cash and voucher programming has been going on for 20 years now, and working with the traditional financial system means that you're working within the constraints of that system. When it comes to cross-border payments, they're more expensive. It is not an efficient system, and it is a system that systematically excludes the majority of vulnerable people that we're trying to help in developing countries. So we were looking to develop something that provided a financial ecosystem that could operate independently of, but also interoperate with the traditional financial system in a lot of these countries. When it comes to flexibility, I think what we're seeing with blockchain is companies like Sempo, who are dynamic, flexible, and quick enough to be able to recode applications on the blockchain, interoperate with multiple stable coins and cryptocurrencies that, again, operate above the financial infrastructure, which excludes so many, to allow us to legitimately transition, adapt, and iterate the interface in each country environment that we use it. Just the fact that this project has been picked up by our team in Venezuela is an excellent sign. And I can tell you that a lot of the bespoke voucher systems, so one of them used by many NGOs is Red Rose. It is a static system. It is a static system that works with a static system, which is the traditional financial ecosystem as we know it. Prepaid MasterCards or prepaid Visa cards also work within those constraints. So if you take an environment like Vanuatu, nobody has a credit card machine. The hardware requirements are just too high, and the financial requirements in terms of fees paid to Visa and MasterCard are much too high to be obtainable for people who live in poverty and that we're trying to support. So when you look at blockchain and you look at all the financial use cases that increase the speed, the traceability, and the cost, reduce the cost of payments, those are all things that we benefit for in cash and voucher programs. And just to clarify what I mean when I say cash and voucher programs, my job as a humanitarian cash specialist is to come into an emergency and pay tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that I don't know and have never met before. So I need to be able to set up quick, flexible systems that people understand, that will get them money from Europe to them as quickly as possible and in a way that they feel like they're participating in. And I think that participation piece, as Marcus was raising, is where vouchers become extremely useful. Blockchain technology can automate what is normally a very complex system with vouchers that's difficult to administer, which for us now has become even easier than using local banks to issue payments.
Right. Right. This is also interesting to highlight that, which might be obvious, but I don't want to take this for granted, that all of those projects and digital currencies and community currencies are basically used and employed on mobile phones, right? This is we owe basically the benefits of those solutions to mobile technologies. And as Sandra was saying, there are places basically where there are no cash machines, there are no machines to transact with credit cards, but almost everywhere in the world people have mobile phones. And we were discussing this yesterday, and Hive Online project was highlighting the KaiOS system, which is rapidly growing, and yeah, this is, I think, quite an important aspect of all of those projects, that we are really relying here on mobile technology, and this is giving flexibility, but also what other projects here are emphasizing, empowerment. So this being said, Karim, you have stressed that CoinSense is turning into social entrepreneurship, and you told me when we were discussing this that you wanted to develop a project where you can mobilize community, but not investing a single cent in it, because you believe that that those communities just need empowerment. They don't have really the money without, well, maybe with a little stimulation. So if you can talk about, tell us a little bit more about the aspect of empowerment and why those communities that you try to serve have really the answers, and what you've learned from certain projects that we were developing in Tunisia.
All right. So thank you. In terms of empowerment, we see a lot of, for example, students which are really great and innovative, but they are always trying to find funding to start moving ahead with their project. And what we try also is just to tell them is why do you need money to pay the other student to start your social business? Why you don't give the other student share in the business you are creating? And this is something which needs first a mind shift, because when you people should first understand it's better to get shares in and ownership in what they create rather than money, because in long terms they will take the risks and the benefits. And this is the first mind shift which people should have, and which empowers them first to take the risk, but also to take the benefit in long terms. And the other thing is empowering people to collaborate, to share ideas, and to give them the confidence. Hey, guy, when you support some, nobody will steal your idea, and you will work together. They removing this competition mindset to a collaboration and putting a collaboration mindset is empowerment, because you have to feel strong to be open to collaborate. And these are many steps where we try to create this empowerment. And the third thing is by telling people, hey, all the resources which you need as a community, you don't need an external investor to mobilize your local resources. You have all the resources which you need to build a restaurant or to build a small company. So, and this is just opening the eyes and say, okay, using community currencies, you can really start a local economy without a single cent from outside. And especially innovation doesn't really require a lot of investment. It just requires just some knowledge exchange and some talents to work together.
Right. So when I hear you speaking about this, and we all learned about other projects, it seems more and more that what people really need in those critical situations and in crisis mode, but also in the specific crisis, liquidity crisis, is really the tool, right? So can you tell us on the concrete example? Let's turn to use case and talk about some concrete aspects of it. How does it work? Like how CoinSense is really enabling, waking up those, as you called ones, those sleepy untapped resources with the community currencies. Like how does it happen really? Concrete examples.
In a concrete way, so people, when you have peoples or networks which have common challenges and they want to work together, but they don't know each other, so they can first put their resources and services in the platform and say, okay, I'm willing to contribute with this value with my service or with a discount or whatever. And based on the commitment of all these people who say, okay, the value of the resource which can flow to the ecosystem, let's say it's $5,000, then you issue 5,000 coins as a community and allocate it to the project based on a participative way. We say, okay, we are willing to move and to share resources, but for which projects? And the community allocates the coins to the projects, and the projects spend it for the contributors. So if you have a project, he gets some coins and he can spend it to whoever contributes to the project. And the community is accepting this currency because they know that this currency has been given to someone who addressed a local challenge or a local problem. And this is how it starts to circulate, because often you might have want to have more sustainability and projects which are green projects, but you are a lawyer and nobody wants you in these projects because your talent is not needed there. But there is always someone who might support the project, and he might need a lawyer. And in this way, you create the whole liquidity in the ecosystem by bringing this currency and spreading the contribution in a broad ecosystem.
Right. And CoinSense, can you tell us also how many currencies are you planning? Are you planning to have on your platform, and how many currencies are right now on the platform? What are the differences between and the reason why there is a need also for having multiple community currencies rather than just one?
Yeah, I mean, what we learned from our experiment is that with a currency you cannot build a community, but a community can build currency. And since there are diverse communities with diverse roots and goals, you need also diverse currencies. And you might need on top some common currencies and exchanges between them, but that's why you need a lot. And some currencies might be bounded to certain commitments, legal commitments or resources. Others are just bounded, present an ideal contribution. For example, in our case, we are distributing now 20 Ether for social projects. This is the challenge we are starting now. And it's based on community voting. And we will issue a currency represented by the ETH first for the voting. And this is backed by a certain budget in the fund. So you need maybe sometimes also a currency just within a street. So we believe there will be a lot. And we have like 3 or currencies at the moment which are starting to circulate. But the start is always, of course, hard.
Right. And Marcus, your project, Digi, is a digital version of euro, which is a common currency for the Eurozone in European Union. And I think you have some ambition to see Digi being scaled across Europe, because it's a solution that can be scaled. But how does it? How can you explain this dilemma, rather, that we need to have very customized solutions for specific communities, and here you have a project that you want to scale, and you potentially want to see that the project happening across Europe. So what's the difference between scaling this and having this, being implemented in many countries using euro, and at the same time this necessity for this kind of solutions to be really custom to the community that they serve? Can anyone hear Marcus? Because I cannot hear him again. No. Okay.
I can't hear him also. I hear you, but not Marcus.
Okay, so we will wait until Marcus connects again. I think he connected with the second device. So let's hope he listen. He can hear us again. We can hear him. Sorry. And yeah, so I will come back to Sandra, because I think that UnBlocked Cash has this interesting aspect of being a voucher system that can grow in different contexts. As Sandra was saying, it's being scaled across the Pacific, and potentially into other countries where Oxfam is operating cash and voucher programs. So, Sandra, can you tell us a little bit more on how does it start? How this starts with the money of the donor country being sent to Oxfam? So how does it work in this system? Like where we have this exchangeability from real money to vouchers, and you mentioned stable coins. So how does this work in this system? And then how does this money from voucher come back to real fiat currency?
Yeah, sure. So we have a couple of examples of that. In the first example, in our first phase pilot that we ran last year in Vanuatu, we made the decision to only use stable coins in the case of cryptocurrency, just to make sure that there was no fluctuation that was disadvantaging local communities in terms of losing the value in their vouchers. But of course, there's still, and I'll speak to this in the case of Venezuela, value when cryptocurrencies kind of are more reliable than the local currency. So the initial program, we used the stablecoin DAI. And we found out that both for Oxfam and the Australian government, who is the donor, neither had any ideas into cryptocurrency. And this has served to kind of enrich and enhance Sempo, who's the tech provider, so the engineers, to enhance their business model. So serving as a financial service provider that effectively takes funds that Oxfam may have from one or multiple donors, or directly from a donor that is planning to give to Oxfam, and converting those funds into cryptocurrency and literally loading them onto the voucher platform. From that voucher platform, Oxfam staff can then redistribute that cryptocurrency and load it on to these vouchers, which are either in card form or can be loaded directly onto an app in a mobile phone. In the case of Vanuatu, the way that this functioned was as a crypto collateralized voucher that was sitting in a smart contract on the blockchain. So although recipients don't need to use cryptocurrency, everything they see is denominated in local currency when they pay. Vendors only see local currency in the application when they receive payments and look at their balance. Oxfam then acts as the liquidator to liquidate the equivalent in cryptocurrency funds that a vendor has made over the course of 1 week, selling to multiple recipients into local currency deposited into that vendor's bank account. At the same time, the crypto voucher liquidates for Sempo. So it kind of has a boomerang effect. As soon as Oxfam withdraws the funds and pays out the vendor, Sempo also liquidates the cryptocurrency on their end. In the case of Venezuela, it's even more interesting because as we know in Venezuela, the bolivar is becoming close to useless because of hyperinflation. The use of cryptocurrency is very ubiquitous in Venezuela because even Bitcoin is more reliable than the local currency. So what we're looking at doing there is building an interoperating system that uses both the capacity to load, the donor will be directly loading USDC, so the USD stablecoin, onto the Sempo platform into a Sempo wallet that is designated for Oxfam. So Oxfam is the custodian of the crypto wallet. Those funds are then redistributed to beneficiaries. And Oxfam, Sempo, and AirTM is basically it's like an e-wallet provider that's used in Latin America mainly. AirTM is then the cash out point for vendors because that is the system which functions in US dollars that allows vendors to cash out funds in Venezuela in a way that pegs their Bolivar exchange directly to the US dollar. AirTM is a peer-to-peer Bolivar US dollar exchange. This is when a vendor is paid at the end of the week. They are paid into their AirTM account in US dollars, and they can hold US dollars and only liquidate those US dollars into Bolivar, into a local bank account whenever they wish and in whatever quantity they wish. So that means that they can reserve their savings in US dollars and protect those savings against the hyperinflation that's affecting the local currency. So there, I think my key message here is the UnBlocked Cash project looks at mobile money, so interoperable with M-Pesa platforms, with Vodafone, local currency cash out in the normal financial system for compliance purposes, and of course work with unique providers like AirTM, because in developing countries, people always need a cash out point. I think that's the main and kind of final point, that both in terms of compliance, but also in terms of, you know, building a system that works for your users. Eventually, once they've paid for everything they need with their vouchers, they do need access to real money. And that for local governments also need to know that crypto money and money that has been facilitated to flow better and faster through blockchain can also make its way into their national financial systems. So that work is actually very important when we're building these voucher systems, not just in developing countries, but I imagine Marcus has thought this through for the EU as well.
Right. Thanks.
Let's give it a try. Yes.
Yes, Marcus. Yes, that's the. So I will just add a question already from the audience because I basically wanted to also touch upon this. So what's the question is, what's the role of local administration and authorities when you're trying to build a community-based currency or issue the vouchers? So it comes really also to this question of compliance and in different Eurozone countries, and the fact that you want to, for instance, scale the Digi solution.
Well, I don't know what you heard before I was kicked out just now. But one thing is that if you create payment obligations that are resting on conditions, what you're doing is you're adding a layer. In a world or in a society where you have a working currency, you don't need another working currency. Although it might be practical to have a digital currency for other reasons, you don't really need it. But what you can need are additional purposes. If you can create payment obligations based on conditions that are bound to the piece of money and not bound to a person, you can enable a lot of things in a community. If the state gives out Digi with the condition to spend it in local shops, that's the aid, that's perfect. But I could give out Digis that are bound to the condition that you help an old lady over the street. And if she signs off on that, the Digi becomes worth something. So you can basically create your own conditions and then just let the Digis roam free, because the conditions are bound to the Digis. So for example, if you say those Digis, once they have been exchanged from, I don't know, someone sharing a specific kind of disease with somebody else who's testing him or whatever, if a condition is met, only then they become valuable. Obviously, once people meet them in the wild, they see the condition attached to it and they wonder, shall I fulfill it or not? If they fulfill it, they can exchange it. So you can basically redirect behavior in a multitude of ways, totally different from the way money is working right now. I think, and I'm convinced actually, we did I think it was 30 minutes brainstorming on what you could do with such a thing. And we found 12 totally different applications. And I think if you would go down conditional payment obligations and really think about it, you get everything from insurances, where the insurance is linked to the object, to betting markets, obviously, but also to pensioners' knowledge retainment, in that you would create projects in your company that can have a specific value once completed, and you allow people that have retired from your company to exchange those tokens, so that you have a valuation, like a stock exchange of if the project is successful or not. And there you get the knowledge of your pensioners about which projects are cool and which are not, the collective knowledge more precisely, and it is not lost once they left the company. And so you have many things that seem weird at the beginning that can be created with this new type of money. Because right now the euro obviously also is an obligation, because the state is saying it's worth something. That is the only obligation you need to fulfill. If you open that box, what's the value of money linked to other than its existence? And if you give people the freedom to basically freely decide what it is linked to, I think you're going to see a lot of things unimaginable today. And what we are trying to provide is a very simple framework with a big first use case. Obviously, this is the most important thing, but once this is done, or maybe not done, but then we look past these issues, what we want to see is we want to see the possibilities of such a framework. If once it's there to work, we would basically give everyone the opportunity to use this framework to explore their own ideas. And it will be fun to watch, I think.
Right. And you should mention probably that Digi has actually got a lot of interest from the German government, right? So
yeah, we've been
Sure.
in the newspaper, and we've regularly talked to the Chancellor's office and the Finance Minister's office. On the one hand, they're very, very positive because they see the potential. On the other hand, the Chancellor Merkel had said that she doesn't want to have digital solutions because they always go wrong, which is completely true. I mean, look at this webinar and my auditory connection. But I think so. These are the two things, and these are two forces fighting in the government. If we manage to tilt the scale, so if we manage to convince the deciders, decision makers, that this is a workable solution, I think they will take part of it and put it into practice. Pretty convinced, because we're pretty close to the politics. We talk to the Bundesblock. We talk a lot with the decision makers, the political ones. I also founded the German Artificial AI Association, and we are talking a lot with government too. And so we have the ears and the ideas, and I think what we need with the whole blockchain space is use cases, no matter which ones, traction. Right. And this is one moment where I see the potential to gain traction. That being said, I don't know how many people are listening in at the moment. We might need programmers in the not too distant future. So if you think this is very exciting and you look at the website, and please feel free to join us. We have a Slack where we try to organize for now, voluntary work. Once we know a test region is going to happen, we probably get the funding for it from private sources, and then we probably do a very normal company. So feel free to look at it in this infancy.
Right. Thank you for that insight into politics. So I am going to have a question to Karim, but Sandra is raising her hand, so I'm just going to quickly give her the voice.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to feed into this question of like digital currencies and governments, because I think what's evolved interesting. So from piloting this system, ramping up for a phase 2 pilot, and now it being effectively the only single platform payment system that we could use for a humanitarian response, we've now opened up a conversation with the Reserve Bank of Vanuatu, who have actually asked us, instead of using a stable coin, can we test the creation of a digital vatu instead of using USDC or DAI as a stable coin? They would actually like to test out this for the purposes of this response, 50,000 people, which is a quarter of the country's population, in order to see if a Vanuatu central bank digital currency is viable in this context using this type of system. So I think I just wanted to point that out. That's something that we're going to build into the system. We will be creating a digital Vatu coin that is collateralized with funds in a local bank account. And it's really the process of using that has allowed us to gain traction with the central bank around that discussion. And we are very much capitalizing on the fact that aid programs do not provide central banks with full transparency on how those funds are used. So that's also a point that I think speaks to Marcus's point, and maybe also to Peter's question. Thanks.
Yeah. So Karim, I actually also feeding really into what Sandra was also saying, which kind of signals that there might be a good chance for in Vanuatu at least moving from this crisis mode and with that solution into something more permanent beyond the crisis. I want you to tell us, how does this system currently that you are developing and you are implementing, there are some pilots that you are running in Tunisia and potentially elsewhere, I guess, in the Maghreb region. How does it differ right now in this crisis sort of situation and context, and how do you see that developing those community currencies that you are trying to really to build beyond crisis, because that's essentially what you are trying to go, just move out of the crisis and really create this sustainable system.
Yeah. So the good thing, the crisis has did show us, especially in Tunisia, probably in other countries, the potential of social innovators and social entrepreneurs, and how much they did contribute. If you look, for example, in the L-Space community or the Social Innovation Network community in Tunisia, they made masks, they mobilized 3D printing plants to build solutions for COVID. And all these things happened without a formal organization, without a legal entity. These are great people who gathered other people together and started just doing. And you saw really very fast the impact. Within two weeks, they were even struggling in the beginning to get minor funding, but they made them a major impact within weeks. And in this time, there was no way to give them a single cent because there is no legal entity, there is no organization. And we have seen that there is no way to fund non-formal organizations. And if you go through the official ways and take all organizations, you will lose like 40% in transaction fee, in management and reporting and whatever, and there is no transparency. So this is the thing we have seen.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing we have seen is that no decision maker, no big organization is capable to react within 2 weeks and select from the good initiatives the right one, and really seed fund them very fast and incubate them within 2 days and scale them within 1 week. Nobody, and I don't know any organization. And this is which shows that a decentralized network, and which is decentrally organized, if you put water and liquidity on it, it can really scale very fast. And the other point is when you have a lack of liquidity, but there's a willingness of companies to contribute with resources and give commitment, like a co-working space which says, okay, I'm closed now, but if people act now, I'm willing to give them access to my co-working spaces when I open. And based on this commitment, you can issue a currency, give it to those who act today to get them rewarded in the future. And this creates a complete flexible ecosystem. And building on the ecosystem which has been created, the networks which have been established in the last weeks, we will try to support them and build a long-term ecosystem for social entrepreneurs, because after COVID, we have to go back to the old bigger challenges, which is climate change, which is inequality and a lot of stuff. So we still have a lot to do. And we need this structure as a basis to move ahead.
Right. So would you say, two follow-up questions to what you said. One is from Demba. Is Coinsense platform only being built for Tunisia or elsewhere?
No. So since we are our core team is based in Germany and in Tunisia, and the UNICEF initial funding for innovation fund was for a pilot in Tunisia. We built this community, but it's international. But what we are trying, when you make a pilot, you have to allocate a lot of resources and people who mobilize the ecosystem, and you have to focus on certain areas. But it's everybody can use the platform and build his own ecosystem in Coinsense without asking us. Just they can move ahead. And this is our goal, of course. We want to create international synergies and thinking about open source, thinking about a lot of stuff. It should be really completely open. And this is our goal, of course. And it's open source, so if you don't like the solution, just forget and use it.
Right. Absolutely. So just we are slowly wrapping the session. I have some final questions, but I would just like to know if there are any more pressing questions from the audience, and also if you the speakers have questions to each other, then feel free to ask about anything really. So just want to highlight, feel free to ask some questions. There was a question to Marcus, if he can compare Digi to CDBC. I must actually say that I don't know what this acronym stands for. There's too many of those recently. Marcus, if you hear us, then
compare.
Yeah. Can you compare? How can you compare? Probably, how can you compare Digi to CDBC?
I do not have enough knowledge about the letter to do that, unfortunately.
But you maybe I will turn this question into into something that was said yesterday by Grassroots Economics founder Will, that what they think of their solution, which you're probably familiar with, it's similar to bonds backed by future purchase. Do you see Digi as also similar to that definition, that idea?
Basically, yes. It is definitely a debt instrument and therefore a bond, and any company could give out bonds. The question here is, unfortunately, or it's one thing is reversed though. Bonds usually give liquidity now and then terminate it later. What we're doing here is the liquidity event comes later and the action comes first. And this is the main difference. So because you do say you promise to pay in the future for stuff that happens today, which is similar to a credit, obviously, and it's similar to a debt obligation. But since there's no liquidity event, it is also in crisis mode better for the state, because only the liquidity only then gets drained once the whole process is done, and not the other way around.
Right. So, Karim, go ahead.
One question to Marcus, just to challenge each other. So when I love, of course, programmable currencies, but I was thinking, if we give the state an instrument to steer our behavior and tell us where to spend it. I was at the beginning thinking, do I want it? Especially maybe the German government will ask me to buy a car or give me money just to spend it as a voucher for a car. So do we want, based on the current state, do we want that the state decides with the framework where to spend it, or do we need on top another governance layer which strengthens our democracy? Because if I can decide how, as a citizen, where the money should be spent, what's the governance layer, then it's enhancing democracy. It's really you have more tools to enforce the democratic will a little bit, because I think all the Germans do not want that the government subsidizes big Lufthansa and Mercedes.
Yeah, this is a huge problem, and this is why we think, although it is smart, for example, to finance car makers because they're a vital part in the middle of a huge economic network and everything, not everyone would agree. But I think what can be done is you can have the big decisions that are democratically legitimized, that you, for example, say, look, we want to help those enterprises that are small, local, regional, whatever, you name it, or even broader, we want to help those enterprises that do not profit from the crisis. You know, you can make decisions like those, and then you need tools that are able to comply with those. Those you don't have at the moment. At the moment, you would always need a very specific action, for following a very specific decision made by politicians. And this is where I agree with you, right? Because we don't want that. We don't want the lobbyists hanging around, and those who can talk but don't get the funding, and those who don't. Let the people make this decision. Let the people decide where they want to spend, or which artists they want to support, or which local, I don't know, he wants to support, or make the government decide which food producer local gets support.
I think this is actually great point, which leads us really back to people deciding what they want to trade, what they want to spend money, and this is actually also a great lesson, talking about lessons from development sector that we can take from humanitarians, because as Sandra, that's something that you can elaborate on. People in recipients of aid prefer to use cash over in-kind aid. There has been a growing trend over the years, and also this really feeds into this division of unrestricted vouchers, right? Unrestricted cash. So that's maybe you can add something from your side, and from your humanitarian perspective, how people receiving aid, why does it matter that they receive unrestricted cash, so they can spend it basically on whatever they want and not being told you have to spend it on certain things?
Yeah, I mean, for us in the development aid sector, it's all about dignity, flexibility, and making sure that people are able to exercise their own choice. It is undignified for somebody to decide that you need food and you need a roof over your head. Ultimately the communities themselves are better placed to make these decisions. But also when we look at vouchering systems like Digi or like UnBlocked Cash that function as fully transparent, unrestricted vouchers that are able to inject liquidity into the microeconomy, right? So because we're not dealing with big banks and expensive systems, what this means is that we can allow people to exercise that choice in a way that allows aid money to circulate and recirculate within their local communities, instead of going to a big grocery store or going to, a big shop that might be selling imported goods that ultimately are not going to benefit that country. So I really see it as a way of facilitating that dignity of choice, but use what cryptocurrency was originally pitched as. So try and use a tool that makes programmable money a reality, that allows people to bootstrap their own economies and really lead their own recovery through the vendors in their villages, in their communities, and around them, as opposed to just being, receiving a bag of rice, or having to go to a bank that some people are afraid to go to because they don't have the identity requirements. So for me, it's a way of kind of localizing that process and making sure that that choice remains flexible, but that choice is directed in a way that enables the local economy, as opposed to allowing funds to flow out of the country. And I think the point on central bank digital currencies is a really interesting one, because for me, the ultimate gain on central bank digital currencies is that it allows central banks to interact directly with the citizens of a country. Right now, that's impossible because the intermediaries are all banks that are taking a cut off the top and telling you can't have a bank account because you don't have enough money or you don't have the right identity document. And removing those barriers, I really think, in a way that enables local economies, is critical and is probably going to be scalable because of solutions like Digi or UnBlocked Cash that give people a tool to engage with the vendors that they know and trust.
Right. And there was a question following my question: do people know what they want? And I think that development sector really can prove. There has been really bunch of studies. I think one of the greatest resources, humanitarian index, or I will post a link shortly, that talks about different surveys and research that has been done. People know what they want, and actually this is what the development work has proven, that people given cash, giving vouchers, unrestricted, spend it better. They get out of poverty much quicker. They build resilience quicker. So yeah, that's something that I think, can learn a lot from from that sector.
Yeah, I mean, I would honestly, Maciej, I would even add that I think the problem is that people with too much money don't know what to do. People with not enough money know that they need to eat, their kids need to go to school, they need health care. You know, people in a state of crisis or people living in poverty are being much more prudent about their budgets than people who are living in excess, right? So if you look at the useless goods and services, I mean, the Kardashians being a case in point, things that really need, but everybody is glorifying and spending money on, you know, working with people who are in a state of stress means that you're working with people that really have tunnel vision in terms of their basic needs, you know, and being able to meet those basic needs as closely to their household as possible. To me, what that says is local economies should be leading the way instead of, you know, international stakeholders maybe deciding on behalf of the poor people what they might need. Meanwhile, you know, said donor who's making that decision might be shopping on Amazon for something entirely useless.
This is right. Yeah, I think this is very well put, and I think this is what Karim can also really relate with his work. And this was basically my sort of what I was alluding to in introduction. Some of us, even in developed countries, can feel currently, especially at the beginning of the lockdowns, what that really feels, where you don't know what your money, what happens to your money, and suddenly you realize what are the priorities on what you have to spend your money on. So, and you turn to local economy, really. And this is actually, I think, a great experiment that we are all experiencing currently globally, that we are all turning to local economies, because that's our basic sort of reaction and need, and this feels safer. And I think that also that element of trust that actually all of you have mentioned, how important that is in developing those solutions and rolling them out, actually plays a big part here. So just to wrap it up, before we close, Sandra had actually great closing statements, I guess. But if you want to add then something, then please do so. But Karim, how, just to finish, summarize what we've been talking today and yesterday, what's the next step really to see those communities, those local communities, to get resilient and get those solutions such as CoinSense to really get off the ground and get scalable and probably get support of the central banks, etc. So what are the next steps here?
The next step is keeping iterating and keeping talking and convincing people to especially trying to get some big player, also some bigger organization, some big student organization or sponsors or NGOs in the ecosystem could help a little bit boosting the ecosystem. When I talk about sponsors, it could be like private members who offer their resources to the ecosystem and make the first steps. And what we have to do is keeping iterating and showing at a certain moment the added value. And yeah, it's a lot of advocacy and education work which we have to invest, and it might take a lot of time until things change. But yeah, we keep. So these are things we can do.
Yeah, thank you. And Marcus, as your closing statement, what would you say is, from your perspective, from Digi perspective, the next step into bringing that into fruition? And do you see Digi being used to dispensing another another batch of government aid in Germany? And if so, then starting with which land, which city?
Well, we're looking for a test region, and this is what we're working on right now. This is the next step, or no step for now. It also depends on the expectations people have if these crisis has further iterations until it is resolved or it doesn't. But generally speaking, this crisis is a moment where many sad things happen, many good things happen too. And we see a jump start in digitalization, which we haven't seen in decades. And there is a lot of positive things happening. And there is a huge power grab by international digital corporations. And if we do not infuse decentral solutions in this moment, some of these things will stay permanent. And for example, in Europe, we face the decision, is it going to be Libra? Is it going to be a EU-run centralized or a decentralized currency? This moment is shaped right now. And I'm guessing it's going to be Libra. But I have hope that we might influence it for the better.
Okay, all right. Sandra, any last word or?
No, I mean, just thanks for having me participate. And honestly, to anybody who's kind of in the group, maybe I'll just post my email if anybody wants to be in touch or wants to maybe explore opportunities in their own country, make it grow organically with Oxfam or without Oxfam.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So thank you, everyone who has joined us. I would like to give a shout out to Khalid and Micah from Script, who helped to organize this session and were driving this and making this session happening behind the scenes. And if you haven't read or haven't seen, then in the handout on the right-hand side, you can download the community currencies report that we have published with Script at Positive Blockchain. And we keep exploring those topics, and we are really happy to be sort of facilitators of those conversations, because we really believe that by collaborating and connecting those different projects within the blockchain for impact space, we can really see those projects get adopted and succeed. And as all of you were saying, this is a great opportunity that we are now witnessing. So let's hope those projects are gonna soon have great results and will help us to build strong local resilient economies. And yeah, looking forward to any feedback that you have for our sessions. You can contact us at hello@positiveblockchain.io. This session was recorded with all the technical issues and adventures, but if you would like to join the conversation, then we'll be sharing obviously the link to this recording and also the documents and some exchanging the emails following the webinar. So thank you again for joining us. Sandra, have a good evening, and to the rest of you, have a great day, and let's stay in touch. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
It was nice to meet you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.